Good afternoon. Welcome to the Planning Commission meeting, 4:30 p.m., Thursday, August 27th, 2020. I'm going to post a public meeting notice, receive an order filed, the public meeting notice stating that the Planning Commission will conduct their meeting by teleconference pursuant to the authority of the Minnesota Statute 13D.021 due to COVID circumstances. So, item 3, approval of the minutes from the July 30th, 2020 meeting.
I make a motion to approve them.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? None said. All in favor signify by
We
aye.
have to do a roll call.
Oh, that's right. We're going to do a roll call.
Okay. Ms. Earl?
Aye.
Ms. Aukus?
Aye.
Ms. Mako?
Aye.
Mr. Karnitz? Okay. Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Firth?
Aye.
Mr. Mack?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 4.1 is to consider the application of Rick Rising requesting a variance from the city code to allow a 1.5-foot side yard setback for purpose of constructing a 10 by 12 storage shed on the property located at 125 South State Street and legally described as 75 feet times 105 of parts lots 8 and 9, block 104, south of Center Street. Required side yard setback is 10 feet. We look for staff for report.
Okay. The applicant for this variance is Rick Reason, and the property owner is Rachel Reason. Street address is 125 South State Street. And the property is generally located just north of the intersection of 2nd South Street and State Street. The land use designation for this property is low density residential, and that's according to our comprehensive plan. The surrounding land uses are low density residential to the north, south, and east, and then business or Turner Hall to the west. It's zoned B1 limited business zoning district, and its surrounding zoning includes B1 to the north and east, and then R2 to the south and west. So R2 is single and two family residential district. Currently the site is used for a single family home. There are residential uses to the north, south, and east, and then again Turner Hall to the west. There was a notice of a public hearing published in the Journal on August 15th in 2020, and to date staff has not received any comments on this variance application. So to describe this project, the property owner is proposing to construct a 10 by 12 foot long detached storage shed 1.5 feet or 1.5 feet from the east property line, which would be the side property line. Property is located in the B1 limited business zoning district. In this zoning district, the side yard setback for a structure like this, or for a structure, is 10 feet. In the B1 zoning district, it is intended to provide a district which is related to and may reasonably adjoin high-density or other residential districts for the location and development of administrative office buildings and related uses which are subject to more restrictive controls. The largest area of the B1 zoning district in New Ulm is located from 2nd North Street to 2nd South Street and between State and Broadway. There are two other smaller B1 zoning districts, and they're located all the way on the north end on 20th North, and then again all the way on the south end on 20th South. In total, these areas equal about 2 city blocks. So section 9.09 subdivision 5C1 of the city code requires that there should be a side yard of on each side of a building, each yard having a width of not less than 10 feet. There are multiple other single-family residences on between 1st South Street and 2nd South Street on this block and throughout the B1 zoning district in this area of New Ulm. Again, this property consists of a single-family residence with a 30 by 32 detached garage. In the B1 zoning district, there is no criteria for maximum amount of detached accessory structures. However, there is criteria for maximum lot coverage, which is 50%. When you add all of their structures on the property up together and take a look at the total square footage of the lot size, it amounts to about 17% of the lot is filled up with structures currently. The proposed new shed would be 1.5 feet from that side or east property line and approximately 49 feet from the rear or north property line. Other locations on the site for the shed, to be placed would also be within the setback areas. There are no other locations on the property for a building this size to be placed on the property and maintain the required setbacks. So if he was to go closer to third south, that would be within the front yard or close to within the front yard, but to keep it off of his driveway or in the grass area on that side, it would be again too close to that side property line. If he were to put it on the State Street side, the required setback there is 30 feet, and he wouldn't be able to maintain that either. So that is why he's applying for this variance. There are a couple of alternative actions. One would be not to allow a reduced side yard setback, lessen the variance amount, or there's other options too if the planning commission sees fit. The supporting data for this application is attachment 1 is the variance application. Attachment 2 is the map showing the location of the property and the proposed location of the building. Should note that staff did go out there and we did find one property corner that we were able to measure off of, which would be the southeast corner of that property. Attachment 3 is the zoning map, and attachment 4 is our ground level photographs. So if this were to proceed, staff would recommend one condition that the property owner should locate the boundaries of the entire property and verify the location of the proposed building on the site prior to installing the building. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you, John. Open it up for discussion. Do we have the applicant here by chance to ask any?
No.
Was there any callbacks or anything else from the neighbors?
I didn't receive any.
I had an inquiry from the neighbor to the north about when the meeting and stuff was and gave the information. That was his inquiry about the variance.
Have we granted similar variances in the B1 district prior?
The B1 district.
Or for what was, this
Well,
is considered,
We've granted a lot of side yard setback variances or rear yard setback variances on residential properties or properties used as residences for detached accessory structures. Now in the B1, I'd have to look back to see if we've granted any of those. There hasn't been any in the top of my head that I've seen granted. But in the B1 district, the B1 properties on the north and south side of New Ulm don't have residences in them. It's only this area from 2nd North to 2nd South where those residences are, and almost all of them are along State Street.
I would note that, the side yard setback is 10 feet in an R2 zoning district, where most of the residences in this block would be located, would have to maintain a 5-foot setback. So that's one factor. There was a time when we, I can remember we asked the Planning Commission to consider rezoning this property to R2 since, almost all of the uses in the block are, of a residential nature. And the Planning Commission at that time declined to do so. So
1.5 feet, is that enough to give somebody enough space to paint that shed on his own property and everything else?
Well, have you looked at, there is a baby, a daycare center next to it on the side street. And she has a chain link fence around her entire property, which is on the property line. And they have a foundation pad on the side of the attached garage already, which is, I am assuming, is where they're gonna put this shed. And didn't look to me like you could even get a lawnmower through there. Maybe you can. I didn't go out and walk on their property and physically check it, but I think it would be very difficult or impossible to maintain that shed or the property between the fence and the shed.
Yeah, I seen, the picture self-described.
Yeah, but picture a chain link fence
Is it a-
next to it.
Is it a,
It's right, it's in the picture. If you pull
Oh,
it
is
up,
it?
you can blow
Okay,
it up, yeah.
okay.
is the shed gonna be just the shed that's gonna be moved in or just built on that path?
It's one of those, tin sheds that you put together.
So it's like a big erector set, basically. And you-
Yeah.
Correct, yeah, I mean, what they put in for a foundation of it is heavy duty for this type of shed. It's just one of those, inexpensive metal sheds that they can put in.
And I suppose from the original garage to the shed, you need some walking space there so you can get in the back of that.
Walking space, and it has to meet building code, which would require.
We need a separation between those two sheds of 5 feet or right one of the walls, which probably the wall inside the existing garage would be rated.
And the homeowner's aware of the
Correct.
circumstances.
There's not a home, the property owner didn't sign off on the application. Is that just an oversight, or are they aware of the request?
The
The property owner didn't
right,
sign?
Rachel, his wife. So Rick signed it and submitted on behalf of her.
Okay, I didn't want to assume they were married because it wasn't true.
So did I hear that there will be 5 feet between the garage and the,
There's not 5 feet between the garage and the new shed they're proposing, but then they would have to rate one of the walls per building
Okay.
code to get a fire separation between the two.
do you know how much room there will be between the shed and the garage?
I think it's on the upwards of maybe a foot, 18 inches.
Is there any meters or anything on the side of this garage that the city would need to?
Nope.
Nope, there's nothing there? Okay.
Not in that area, no.
So no utilities is
Not to my
basically.
knowledge, no.
I should note earlier, in 2019, when we granted a variance where the detached accessory structure was really close to another existing building, we required that applicant to rate that side of the shed that was closest to the other building for a fire rating.
Yeah, that was for the insurance.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I guess the chain link fence and that they're gonna be their problem, not gonna be ours.
Yeah, I don't know how you'd keep the lawn mowed, but that's fine.
Probably gonna be rock or something in there.
Yeah.
I'd make a motion to approve the variance with conditions.
I'd second.
We have a motion and a second then to approve the variance with conditions. John?
Just for clarification, what conditions would you like on this one?
Wasn't there a condition in,
There was a condition requiring the location of the property lines prior to placing that shed. Was there any?
the city has to sign off where that shed is gonna go exactly, correct?
We'll go out and we'll verify where it's at.
Yep.
But again, we don't have a plat of this property that's usable. We only have one property pin to work off of, so we can get close.
Well,
Well, the condition of recommended boundaries that you have written, is that the condition you
yeah.
want?
To the best of their
Yeah.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Who second that? Are they okay with that? Ashley, are you okay with that?
Yes.
So we have the condition in place and we've got a motion and a seconded. Any further discussion amongst the commission? We're gonna have to call a roll on this. And we'll have Dave do that.
Okay. Ms. Earl?
Yes.
Ms. Aukus?
Aye.
Ms. Mako?
Yes.
Mr. Karnitz? Okay. Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Mr. Firth?
Yes.
Mr. Mack?
Yes. Motion carried. Now we will go on to item 4.2. Is consider the application of Andrew and Nancy Liliaden on behalf of Liliaden Business Properties LLC, requesting a variance from the city code to allow an additional 44 square feet of signage on the property located at 1301 to 1305 South Broadway. The permitted amounted sign space for this property is 200 square feet. This is continued from the July 30th, 2020 meeting. We'll look for staff report here.
Sure. So this variance was tabled at the July 30th meeting, and the Planning Commission had a number of requests for both the applicant and the city staff to bring back information today. So we're doing that. So at that July 30th meeting, the Planning Commission tabled it, requesting that they allow the applicant time to consider different options for the sign and to have time to consult with the corporate office at Taco John's on additional sign options. They also directed city staff to review various other Minnesota communities and their sign ordinances and prepare that information for the Planning Commission for the next meeting. They requested, or the Planning Commission requested that be presented today. So the applicant did provide the city with additional information regarding his signage. And what he had asked is that the city reconsider how we measure sign area and how their signs are being measured. Staff took these measurements, these new measurements, and compiled a comparison table of what was previously presented to the commission in July and what is being proposed by the applicant now. And that's in attachment 1. It should be noted that the sign area calculations presented at the July 30th Planning Commission meeting were provided by the applicant in their sign permit application to the city. But the pylon sign area was calculated by staff based on the pylon sign that was selected in the permit application. So that square footage measurement wasn't on that piece of paper that was submitted for the permit. Staff came up with that based on the measurements of the sign that they selected. So the digital reader board provided by the applicant for this meeting had not been included in the July 30th report to the Planning Commission, as this sign had not been included in the sign permit application. I should note that there's one more additional smaller, bigger, bolder, better sign that is located in the drive-through area on the building that also wasn't included. I have that information. Mr. Liliaden provided us with that information for this meeting, and that's also included in that sign area comparison table. But as far as the digital reader board, it's my understanding that the applicant didn't believe that needed to be part of the new sign permit application because it wasn't a new sign that was being put up. It's just re-putting up a sign that was there. They took it down, put up the new pylon sign, and then reinstalled it. And although that was his understanding, we do include that as a total, as part of the total area, square footage area that's allowed on our property. So for other community sign regulations review, the list of communities to review were provided by the Planning Commission members and staff at the July 30th, 2020 meeting. The communities reviewed were Mankato, St. Peter, Marshall, Wilmer, Hutchinson, Fairmont, Faribault, and North Mankato. The report, attachment 3, includes the information on the following different aspects of their sign ordinances, which would be comparable zoning districts to our B2 or general business district, their definitions of sign area measurements, the maximum amount of signage allowed in their city code, and calculations of allowable sign area in their community if our Taco John's were located in their community, and then additional sign regulations. In the review of those other community regulations, it shows that sign regulations generally greatly vary from city to city. Some communities measure their sign areas different than others. But it was clearly seen that in all communities, they all had their own little nuances or particulars to that community on signs. While there appears to be a maximum allowable sign area per lot in a lot of the communities, there's also a lot of other considerations that have to be factored in with that maximum amount, such as what sides of the building are these signs going on. They take into consideration the maximum amounts of wall signs versus pylon signs. So there's a lot of different nuances in their sign ordinances. It's not just a straightforward, this is what you get for square footage, do what you please kind of thing. Additionally, in New Ulm's grid pattern lot layout, it's unique to other communities and how their lots are laid out. The New Ulm sign ordinance, in my opinion, is the most clear and straightforward compared to the other communities researched. Most other communities do separate types of signs into at least 2 different categories, including freestanding and wall signs. And of the 8 communities reviewed, 6 allow for a total sign area of greater than 200 square feet, and 2 allow for an area of 200 square feet or less. With the exception of Mankato, they have a B3 district, their highway business district, which would allow 1 square foot per lineal foot of lot frontage. In how we apply the sign, or the city applies the New Ulm sign ordinance, in reviewing the various signages throughout New Ulm, pin-mounted signs with standalone letters, that's again with no background or no border around them. Staff has found that these signs have been being installed at least since 2001. And to date, these procedures for measuring the signs have been the same and hasn't changed. Because we've been using the city code definition under section 9.03 subdivision 55, which defines the surface area of a sign. And I'm just going to read that out loud. The surface area of a sign means the entire area within a single continuous perimeter enclosing the limits of the actual sign surface. Does not include any structural elements outside the limits of such a sign and not forming an integral part of the display. Only one side of the double-faced or V-type sign structure shall be used in computing total surface area. So I had a number of different alternative actions, or at least 2. Do not increase the amount of square feet of signage allowed on the property, and then another option would be lessen the variance amount. Supporting data, I would like to actually go through a little bit of this, if you wouldn't mind. Supporting data would be, first thing is attachment 1. So attachment 1, page 1 of attachment 1, is a table showing what we had calculated for the last meeting in July, showing that 235.75 square feet, and what the applicant had submitted in an email requesting that we consider a different way of measuring that signage. His total number came up to 190.5 square feet. So that is that information. I should note that if we were to have included the digital reader board and then the drive-through wall pin letters, that would have added an additional 22.5 square feet. So to kind of give you a better visual of the way the city measures sign surface area versus what the applicant is proposing as to how we measure it, would be the second page of attachment 1. You can see that it's just making a basic rectangle around the extreme most parts of the letters and bottom of the sign, and just drawing a rectangle, and you're getting length times width for a total square footage or surface area of that sign. The example below breaks it up a little bit, and what it's trying to do is not include some of those blank spaces or large blank spaces between letters. And you can see that when you make that change, you would go from what we would call 24 square foot sign to an 18.1 square foot sign. So not taking that into account does change the total square footage quite a bit. And I should note that some communities do use this type of this way of measuring total sign area, and some communities don't. It's more or less split on that. All right. Let me get to my other attachments here. Okay, and then attachment 2 would be, again, the sign submitted by the, or the sign areas submitted by the applicant with the highlighted total square footage amounts on those sign depictions. Attachment 3 would be the sign regulations from those communities that we researched. And then attachment 4 is an aerial photo overview of the site. And then attachment 5 are the pictures of the sign. I went out to the site and took pictures of the signs and then tried to depict on these photos what the applicant is proposing that the Planning Commission consider for not including these areas in the dotted, let's call them dotted boxes, as part of the total sign square footage calculation. So, let me get back. There were 2 recommended conditions. One, that the applicant shall contact the city building official once all signage on the property is installed to verify compliance with the variance amount granted. And 2, if the variance is granted to increase the total sign area on the property beyond 200 square feet, any further signage on the property in addition to the variance amount granted would require the applicant to apply for another variance. And that would conclude the staff report.
Thank you, John. So I'm going to just straight up here. What way has New Ulm always done it? Just the general length times width, or we haven't ever done the blocking to reduce the footage?
Yep. Mr. Chair, if I might also note that we reviewed this matter with the city attorney, and he said our, the way that we currently are measuring signs complies with what is in the city code. So we're consistent in that manner.
So if we would decide to not count the area where there is nothing, or not include that in the square footage, would we need to change the city code then to match that to be then accurate?
Can you
I might
repeat that,
also-
Ashley? I didn't hear you. What did you say?
I asked if we were to choose the option where we calculate the square footage without using the vacant area, or however you want to word that, would we have to adjust in our city code to then state that we would then continue counting future signs that way?
And you said yes.
Yeah, I would also note that I think it was the city of Marshall, they measure letters, the actual letters of the sign, rather than, so there's even a third way of doing, but that is really extreme in my opinion, and they actually end up then estimating what percent the letters take up in the sign area to come up with a number. I think if this exercise from a staff standpoint brought home is that simple is better. I think we like what we've got. You could.
The same point, that's part of the variance where you're here.
Can you please step up to the mic and please state your name and address for the record, please?
Yep, Andy Lilliadden, owner of Taco John's. So one, I guess just bringing up with Mr. Snowbrook's thing here, not to sway one way or another here, just to state facts. I mean, the point of the meeting here is to look at some of the factual data that John's provided here and decide whether you're going to approve a variance and not talk about whether we want a variance or not. That's, I mean, you guys just approved a variance on a lot setback based on data. So, I mean, this is kind of the same situation here. So I guess we're just trying to interject and be cautious on where that conversation's going. So. I guess my point, you know, some of the, with John's two examples there, with the way the letters are, it's kind of based on, you know, Taco John's new font. You know, now we're all lowercase letters. You know, when we were, the last situation was all block letters. So every letter was the exact same height, basically almost the exact same width across the board. So that made it much easier that way. Now that they've gone to lowercase letters, you know, like in your examples there, the J stands way below and the T stands up above letters and stuff like that. So, you know, just in the one example we did, which would be the front 27-inch letters, that's the way they're sold, as a 27-inch channel letter. So height is 27 inches. But based on doing that entire block that we're talking about, you end up with 38, where is that? 38 and 5/8 inches. So now you're talking about a considerable amount of space extra that isn't physically signage, you know. So when we looked at, just instead of not even calculating letters, just go by the 27, because that's what the physical letters are sold as. I mean, it saves 16 square feet just on that one sign alone, you know. So I guess just to keep in mind of kind of the same with the pylon sign. Like you said, the code talks about the physical containment of the sign, but not the structural. So like my post that comes off the ground is not included, it's just the physical sign. But the way some of the data may have been calculated would be like if you would take that circle behind you on the sign, if that's a 2-foot diameter, you're going 2 times 2 is 4 feet. There's a lot of, the sign is a circle. So we gotta think about, you know, what you're charging somebody for and what is physically signage. So and that's where the second option they talked about with, you know, kind of just breaking down into different blocks of height to get into kind of a fair amount of what is actually signage, reduced that square footage considerably.
I do think the way the city measures is the correct way. Basically, it's, if we grant this variance, what can of worms are we gonna open down the road? And can we back up the variance, giving it to you if we were giving it to, and not the next person down the road? We don't want this signage to make it look like a circus, you know, that's, you know, yours ain't going to, don't get me
No.
wrong, but the next person that comes in, that's what we got to look at here. Are we gonna open up a can of worms by the next business coming in? You got a unique building there, that's the problem. That's the way I look at it. I don't know, I keep on driving by it all the time, and it's a very unique building. You know, it's a nice looking building, and it would look really nice with the leather, but is it gonna open up a can of worms down the road for our next business that comes in? And they're gonna say, Taco John's got it. Are we gonna be able to get it? I don't know.
I'm going to ask staff, have we granted variances in the past with signage within our community?
So we've granted variances for signage, but again, like we reported at the last meeting, they were for institutions. So MLC College and a couple of churches. We have denied one sign variance, and that was at a residential property on Broadway.
But am I correct, it's not that we've only denied one and we haven't received any other requests, correct?
Yeah, for
And the
the
timeline was, those were several years ago, correct?
Oh, yes.
If I'm remembering correctly?
It's been since 1986 that we approved our last business sign variance. And I discussed this matter with the consultant that we're working with on redoing our zoning ordinance. And I asked her, you know, what's your impression about this particular matter? And she said, you've had one variance request since 1986. She said, I would say that's a statement in and of itself that what you have is working for your community.
Were you aware of the sign variance or the sign statute before you proceeded to do all the changes you were going to do? Did you understand that there was this restriction?
To be honest, with the speed of the remodel getting going once COVID hit, because we weren't planning on starting quite this spring, it did slip, so I was aware of it a little bit, but at the same point, I was removing a sign and basically replacing a new sign just with a different font. So it didn't really change. Essentially, like on my vestibules, said Taco John's before. I took them off, I put new ones up, just with a different font. One thing that I would say that came into a change is I had a sign on my drive-through wall that said drive-through, which, maybe 20 years ago that was necessary, now it's not. So that's where we kind of altered and went to putting this bigger, bolder, better on the parapet. So it turned into a kind of a similar amount of signage. So then
except
it
you
wasn't
have-
until we were starting to go put the signs up, we're like, oh shoot, let's just double check, and that's where we're a few square footage over based on the way the city had been calculating at that point.
So, Andrew, if I'm hearing you correctly, you removed a sign that you're not replacing now, but you're adding the bigger, better, bold. So is it
Correct.
you were probably already over before you removed that sign?
But again, that's all on how you measure all the letters, because like I say, last time it was bold letters. Now they're lowercase, so when you start adding the way the J drops down and the T,
You're still
so
going
it's
to be
all-
over.
it's still going to
drive-through
be,
sign
no,
was
but
small.
to Larry's, Mr. Mack's comment is, do I feel I was over before? Those are letters that were approved and up on when I purchased the building.
Sure.
And so
I'm just-
that sign permit, yep.
I'm just wondering where that, at that point in time, if that was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, that,
Yeah.
when that, had a review been done in that process.
It had been done, and I think that was in, if I'm not mistaken, it was 98 or 1999 as part of a whole building remodel for that.
I would probably say 99.
That was
I
a
think.
small
We bought
sign before.
2011. So.
So
99.
When was this piece of and you might not know this, so I apologize, I'm throwing this at you, but when was this piece of the city code written of this is how we calculate? And has it not been updated since?
It was calculated in 68.
Okay.
And if we took a look at the survey from the other communities, out of all those communities, we were, how many would approve that?
Six out of
Was that six?
Six
other
allowed, greater square footage, again with the nuances that they have. So for example, a four-sided building, you might only be able to have signage on two sides, the street facing sides. So there's, again, they might have larger amounts, but we have to read that survey and also kind of look at the nuances that they have at the same time.
Yeah,
Did you
for
notice any-
example,
Go ahead.
if I could just, one other
Sure.
example, one community you're allowed 60 square feet per wall. So you could have it, but it's got to be on that particular wall. So you find those kind of, as John said, nuances. I just want to add one other thing that we found that was of interest is the city of Mankato. They have a architectural signage requirement that if your building has colors other than earth tones that are of a franchise type, that counts as signage. So, depending upon the type of business being operated, that can bring, your signage allowance down too. So, there's a lot of different stuff out there. We are on the low end though. That's obvious.
And
Although-
I'm understanding correctly, if we were to calculate it without using the one number by one number, if we were to calculate it in this new way, then they would fall under the 200 square feet, correct?
It appears that way.
And it's kind of a unique situation because these pin type letters are been around now for about 20 years, and they're not backlit or anything else illuminated, with it. It's just an extra letter. And, I think it looks complimentary, and to the building, and
Well, I drive by it all
You
the
know.
time, and the last 2 weeks I kept on driving by, and I'm just thinking, and then I worry about if McDonald's in a year from now comes and wants to put something on their building, can we defend this and saying they have a unique building? Well, so do we.
Can
So is
I,
it gonna open up a can of worms down the road? But
can I ask you, it does not say bigger, bolder, better now, right?
correct.
Correct. Yep.
And you think the building is okay, and
No, I think it would look really nice with bigger, bolder,
you
better.
think it would be better?
And I think it looks professional.
yeah.
And I think it's gonna really stand out, make his business stand out. There's no doubt about it. It's gonna make it look wonderful.
Are you familiar with where they were going to be from last meeting? Where those
Yeah.
letters were? Okay. Just
So
making
Jeff,
sure.
if we approved the variance on the basis of the new calculation, then going forward, we would be able to use that new calculation for other businesses, and that would be our backing.
No.
For other
Without a
business.
No,
variance.
we would have to
We-
adopt that.
No, we'd have to change the code.
Right, if we changed,
Yeah.
if it went, that's what I meant, if it went through the changing of the code and that was updated,
Yeah.
you're still staying in that 200 square feet. You've updated to new terms, so any new business coming in, you'd have your backing of this, because it would be the new terms.
We'll let Chris, you want to step in?
Just really quick, we are at that point in time where we are looking at redoing our zoning ordinance right now. Dave has alluded to that. So, if you're looking at granting the variance, this can become the basis to what the sign code is moving forward. We have that opportunity where it can go hand in hand, where today it's a variance, but moving forward it's no longer a variance. So you're updating the code to kind of what other cities are doing, how they calculate, and we no longer have to grant variances because it's now set in stone how we do what we want to do as far as the signage goes. So you're kind of at that weird moment in time where you have the opportunity to move forward with this and then have it adopted into the zoning ordinance in a very quick turnaround. And like Dave alluded to, the last time we had one of these was 20 years ago. So, it should be okay. But again, that's up to the planning commission to decide if that's the route they want to go. But you do have the opportunity to make this move forward as not a variance anymore, but just how it's calculated and how you want to see it moving forward.
Yeah, we're hopeful to have an updated zoning ordinance to you with, if we could only get some time, within the next couple months. But we will be presenting at that time a whole new signage section. So,
I'm going to ask Andrew, our last, in July's meeting, we asked you to go back and talk to your franchise. Did you have any, what kind of discussion did you have with them in regards to signage and how they're asking you as an owner, a business owner, to add additional signage to your building? And by doing so, how is that going forward in other communities? Did they allude to anything?
And that's the problem, each building is unique, unfortunately. There's certain franchises out there, we've talked about Joe's Crab Shack, or even most of McDonald's, I'm not gonna say all, are very similar building in each town, whereas Taco John's, there's about 390 some stores in the chain, and I bet you go by, probably 95% of them are all different. So size, so that does come into signage, so they're looking at what fills that size building. I have one of the larger size Taco John's buildings. And so that's kind of where they're at. If I couldn't put that up there, then we'd talk and see what other options we could do with that. As far as I know, one thing was brought up, I think Mr. Golden brought that up about a smaller size. That really was not an option. It's kind of one of those custom sized deals, and then that company's got to rescale all their stuff like that. So, cost effectiveness is just way out of whack on that. So, just the way that stuff works.
Is part of the planning process with the organization to look at the city ordinances and sign recommendations, and that it would seem to me that there would be, depending on what the city is that you're working
Yeah.
in, here's what we have, Taco John's has for you to choose from based on what the city requirements are. Is that part of the planning process?
That was gonna be a hard one to answer. I would say, I would assume so. This is my first remodel with the corporation. I do not want to get too far into that. I've tried working with them for quite a while on the construction side of this remodel. And it became very hard, and we'll just say that the person that at that time has since recently been let go. So there was maybe a little disconnect there where they should have or did, and I made that assumption because that was the drawing they provided me. This is the way that sign was, and I believe that was in last month's packet. You know, that's what they sent me. This is where we want the signage. This is where it should all be located.
So it doesn't sound like they helped you to understand that you needed to understand what your
No,
city
it's just
requirements
for what they needed to have done prior, like you say, to you know, to work with you guys on that. So
I'm going to defend you, and I think it's complimentary, and I'm going to, it's an older building that's been there. I mean, if it was a brand new construction, I'd say we'd have to go by the length and width and follow our policy, and if it was a brand new building, you probably would have another 50 feet of frontage, to have ample parking for a business, and I think being it's a retrofit and I think it looks complimentary, I would have no problem granting the variance.
I have a question though first. The digital reader and the drive-through, which were not part of the original submission, are they indeed, by the way the city currently measures signs, the 22 and a half square feet total, or is that measured by the letter up, empty space thing?
The digital reader sign one is accurate.
Okay.
The other bigger, bolder, better, the smaller one was using the number received from the applicant. So if I had the dimensions, length times width on that, like were provided with the other ones, then I could have that measurement as well.
Okay.
And if you know that, Andy,
yeah.
So in total then, it wouldn't be 235 and 3/4 square feet, it would be 256 and a quarter square feet? So,
Yes.
okay, I just wanted to know.
Clarifying question for me in this process. I'm going to play the
I'm
newbie
sorry.
card. Clarifying question for me in the newbie process. For granting this variance, do we need to specify for granting it in the motion to increase the square footage or to base the variance on the recalculation, the new calculation?
Well, it depends on the motion, yeah.
I think we're going to base it off the application.
Correct.
Yes, not on the.
Then
letters.
if they would ever need further signage, you'd have to come back for another variance application
Right.
to be
And it
consistent
wouldn't-
with our current city code.
So you'd be varying the square footage and not the way it's measured, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
And I guess I'm stating my reason why I support it. It's a unique retrofit of an existing building. And I think that my out loud tells me if it was going to be built brand new there, he probably would need more square footage of land and, to accommodate it. And if he had more land, he would have his signage. That's my thought. I don't know if Dave would tell me
Well,
differently.
We've got a lot of existing buildings in
Correct.
town, and, then what kind of consideration do we give them? That's,
But then again, it's been 30-some years since we've had someone come forward for a variance.
What
Right.
was the reasoning for varying on MLC or any of the churches?
well, MLC was a digital sign. I think that was probably the primary reason there. Elwood?
Because they're in
R1
R1
zone,
district, and they're
that's
allowed
right.
30 square feet.
Yeah.
Oh, so those were all in R1 districts, not,
Yeah.
okay, not business
New high
districts.
school was, then we had churches for the same reason.
More the monument type signs.
Correct.
Well, they had more than
Perfect.
30, and, for example, Cathedral already had a sign on one corner, and they wanted to put a sign on another corner. So, you know, and that's something that we have to clean up in our sign ordinance, but, that was the reason for it.
My thinking is too, I think we're all thinking here, it's tougher than heck right now in the food industry and everything else. And I just think that, unfortunately, we probably don't agree with the city, but with that, I do think that I agree with Larry that we should grant this application and go from there.
Conditions?
So I would make a motion to approve the variance with the conditions that were stated, and make sure you get approval from, or any more signage or anything else from the city of New Ulm. So this is it. What we have in front of us, that's gonna be it. So that's the motion I'd make.
I second.
We have a motion and a second to grant the variance application to Mr. Liliaden on behalf of Liliaden Business Properties LLC with the conditions stated on the sign application for the proposed square footages, and then any future signage would have to come back at a variance application. Dave?
Okay, yeah, just, what are the unique circumstances that weren't caused by the owner?
Pardon?
I think it's a unique circumstance. I would say would be it's an existing structure,
That's the big one right there.
and it's on I'm going to say a narrower lot, on the frontage that we're calculating on the Broadway side.
I would also add, because of the requirements that's coming down from the franchise, I mean, it's not his fault that they changed the font and are making the signs have to be that.
Well, yeah.
Does our city code say that the signage is based on the lot size?
Well, we take for example, if I'm saying this correctly, Dave, correct me. If you have 100 feet of frontage, you take that times 2, and that's our 200 square feet. So we have
Okay.
two 50-foot lots. And how I'm saying it is, you have an existing structure, and then that building's been adapted over my lifetime, because the drive-through was once on the New Ulm North.
Yes.
Now the drive-through is on the New Ulm East of the property. And my feelings are they've retrofitted that building to adapt to the lot. The lot size hasn't changed. And if you're going to take and propose to build a brand new structure there, it might not meet the minimum city code to build that structure with parking and the width, topography, things of that nature. That's how I view it, as being unique.
Definitely not parking.
I'd like to add, Andy, that I can appreciate the situation you're in and your professionalism and trying not to point the finger at Taco John's too much, but at the same time acknowledging the fact that you were under the impression that they were taking care of these details before they gave you a design, which is a reasonable thing to think, I believe, on your part. And if that was understood to be something that they were taking care of, only to find later that you were supposed to be taking care of it, it puts you in a hard spot and a unique situation, I guess, in my opinion.
Appreciate that.
I also wanted to just thank the city staff for going out and finding a lot of information for us. Again, I know it's time and energy, and I appreciate it because it's always a learning thing for me. So thank you for getting that information about other communities.
And as we learned from the other communities, it would be acceptable.
I
In
think that's
more
telling us
than,
something, yeah.
when we were at 6 out of the 8 communities, it would be acceptable, but, every community was a little more unique. John stated that New Ulm was pretty cut and dry and clear with the way it's written, but right now, I just don't want to, I like the length times width, and I would rather just keep it simple, and then for the future,
I
Come-
can understand a
come by
variance for
variance.
square footage, not necessarily measuring the letters
For
each.
each individually.
I mean, that's,
Yeah.
So,
you're gonna need a master's accountant.
Yeah. Dave, does that help you with enough direction as far as saying a unique,
No, this goes to the city council and it's ultimately
Yeah.
their decision.
correct, but just for the record, for your notes for the council's meeting,
Yeah.
how we're stating it.
All right.
So we do have a motion and a second, to approve the variance.
And one more
John?
clarifying question. So the application was for, he said 22 square feet per sign. So that would have been a total of 44 square feet. But when you add in the digital reader board and the drive-through letters, can I just do the math on that real quick?
It was my understanding we were going up to like 256 and 3/4 square foot, right?
Yeah, you can only approve what the applicant requested. You can approve less, but you cannot approve more.
So we can't
So-
include the
No,
two extra
you'd
signs
have
that
to
he didn't, he has
reapply
to
and start
reapply
the
for that?
process over.
So he'll have to come back for the,
If that's what he wishes to do, that's his decision.
Okay. So it's only the
do you
two.
understand that, Andrew, what Dave's saying by the application?
So,
So now we're gonna be back in this square one.
so, so you're gonna try to say that technically those two signage, should not be installed at this point then, until I come back again next month. Is that what we're?
Well, so
'Cause the signage, just to clarify, like, the reader board, like you said, never came down, that was just, and we had Sid in, the drive-through one was supposed to be in there, and well, actually, I told John, I said, well, it's in there, until he handed it to me, and here it was not. So, yeah, I guess,
So is it
give me
his best option to
clarification on
come
that.
back with the whole thing and ask for one variance?
I'd have to refer to John or Dave about that if you wanted to.
What's the question?
Is it his best option rather than reappear? Well, he's gonna have to reappear anyway if we don't include the drive-throughs, the two signs that were not in the original application. So we're approving this at 235 and 3/4 feet.
We're gonna be short by 22.5.
We're gonna be short by 22.5 square feet, and he's gonna have to come back anyway
Correct.
for that 22.5 square feet. Is that what I heard?
of additional.
Yes.
But if we just table it again, can
No,
can
No,
we
we can't
We have a
table it again.
deadline as far as,
We have a 60-day rule.
So we'd have to refuse this, and then he could come back and reapply entirely?
Well, you could approve it as he has requested, and then he would have to reapply for the additional amount, or you could deny it and he could reapply for the whole package.
whole
It's
thing.
kind of your option.
And the signage is up already.
So if the sign.
Yeah, because the one never even came down, so I applied the variance,
To the
as was the
additional.
whole package, the
it's not
original
in-
permit, Sid, from Sid Signs actually worked with Elwood on that to calculate that square footage of what he was installing, therefore missing the one, but didn't include the reader board because that never came down. That's been up for numerous years. So that's where that one obviously got missed, so we had two parties working. My variance was to include the whole encompass, but
So he has to come back no matter what.
Correct.
Sounds like it.
But the signs are already up, so he doesn't have to take them down or do anything, because he can reapply next month. I just want to make sure.
Well, no, the bigger, bolder, better are not on the building because we stopped when we needed to come for the variance.
Right.
But based on what Mr. Snowbrook actually would be talking about is if you were to approve this now, I would be able to go put the bigger, bolder, better up on my building. But then I guess that would be under your discretion whether the city would force me to remove my reader board and those pin letters for a matter of 30, 60 days, whatever, would that, Mr. Snowbrook, would that be correct in what Because the sign permit included bigger, bolder, better, and all these, but it did not include the reader board or those drive-through pin letters that are already on the building. So we got kind of two different.
Yeah.
You're saying,
I don't think we would make anybody, take anything down at this point in time. I think we would want to have a final resolution of this matter before any further action would be necessary.
Is it fair to say, Dave, that as long as he's in good faith pursuing a resolution to this, that we wouldn't cause
we wouldn't
that
take any
hardship
action,
of
yeah.
removing and then
Right.
putting these things up? But what I'm also hearing, Andy, is that we can't over-approve what's already been applied for as far as the total square
Just what you
footage.
have on this sheet of paper.
Yeah, which, again, would be those bigger, bolder, betters, letters, pin letters that are sitting at said signs. So what we're saying is technically I could call him, he could install them, because that, if you approve this, they could go up, it's just, I have to come back for 2 existing signs that are currently installed.
you said you wouldn't remove anything until there was a final resolution. So if we were to deny this and then he reapply completely, would that be sufficient if if included all of the signage the way the city currently does it, and then we just do the 256 and 3 1/4 square foot, and he still doesn't have to put his bigger, bolder, and better up, but he can include the signage, and then we just have one clean, is that what I understood you to say?
That's one option.
Either way, it's
Either way, there's.
Either way,
it's
it's
gonna
another
take 2
meeting.
months.
John,
For
or can I clarify, it is by sign that you were calculating the sign permit, not by square footage?
So the,
Because I didn't actually do the sign permit.
sure, so in the sign permit, it's listed as attachment 4.
Okay, so it was by sign.
It's based on
Okay.
this.
I'm sorry.
Well, so if we vote this in and he puts those letters up, he's basically gonna come back and ask for forgiveness on the digital reader board and the drive-through board, basically, because they're already up.
On a second.
Yeah, but the city would, the city would like a whole clean.
It's a wash on square footage.
That's
Yeah.
kind of what I was,
He'd be compliant at that point and then coming back for the bigger, bolder, better of the 22.5 square feet or whatever. So-
You think he's in compliance if he puts that up or if he
Well,
doesn't?
not put it up, but
Yeah,
he's in compliance with what he's got there now. If you grant the variance the way it is, the square footage is equal to what the bigger, bolder, better would be if the.
No, it's not.
Was gone.
bigger, bolder, better is more, but he'd be in compliance, yeah.
Wash on the square footage.
Yeah.
Do you have to order the bigger, better, bolder signs?
no, those pin letters are sitting at SID signs right now, waiting for install or hopefully
Okay.
or resale.
So he has to come back and before we, so we don't care if the bigger, bolder, better is up, he's not putting them up, he'd be
No.
compliant,
We're
and
just looking at the square footage to me
Okay.
at that point.
so you just come back again for the bigger, bolder, better.
Well, he would,
No.
no,
We're gonna grant that
we would
tonight.
grant that tonight, the bigger,
No,
better,
we would
bold,
not.
And then-
We're granting the square footage.
per the
application.
per the application.
Okay.
Yeah, application was by sign, not by square footage, that's why I just want to
Correct.
verify with John, so if
But
you
it's
grant
Square
it,
footage that's over, it's whether, if he so choose to change the sign out and was still with that square footage, we
Yeah,
wouldn't be
but
having a
what,
discussion about changing the
what
sign out.
was
if
it,
it's the
what
same
did
square
it say it
footage.
was for?
Okay,
I mean, that's been done many, numerous times that we're changing like for like. We don't,
you're not looking at what sign it is, okay.
it's like for like.
Okay, the application says, explain how you wish to vary from city code requirements. 2 additional signs per Taco John's, rebranding sign requirements, each sign adding 22 square feet, which would be located on each side of the upper, and then I don't,
parapet.
parapet.
Yeah.
So that's what the application was for.
But as John's noting, we
Currently, we're
Well,
at 213 square feet.
Actually, if I can check,
Can we take,
want to be careful here a little bit. Essentially, I suppose it's how it's listed here. Because we permitted the signage that I had on the building, which is why, why we kept those letters off, because that was what we looked at as exceeding, so that got approved, because it was under the 200. That's why the variance that I submitted was just for the 2, because that was the understanding, everything that's up there on that site was already approved,
Existing.
except for those 2 signage that took me over. Therefore, the variance request was for the 2 signs. But now we're
What's this say?
getting into details, so.
And that was prior to realizing that the digital sign should be included as well as part of that,
Correct.
so,
Either
sure.
way. he
Is that
has to
stated in
comply.
our city code, the digital menu boards, are they stated, in all signages? That
Yeah,
that's part of
they're-
the,
They're included in the definition of sign. Yeah.
So we either vote this one down and he comes back with a clean application, or we vote this one, approve this, and he comes back anyway
With an
to
additional.
cover
yeah.
Yeah,
whatever else is missing.
that's the way he doesn't have to wait on it, because I,
So what I need to do, a new sign permit and a variance?
You would
I
have
just
to,
want to clarify that.
that's what, when we get done with this meeting, you clarify with John, because that's what he gets paid the big money for.
I just,
you would have to get another variance application.
That's my
If
understanding.
to do
That's,
the whole
that would be
thing.
an
Right.
application process. So either way tonight, Andrew, we can only do so much.
Yeah, no, I,
So obviously, when we met in July, we didn't know about the other menu board or the digital part,
yeah.
if I'm hearing correctly here.
Yeah, we don't include menu boards.
At the
In the
reader,
calculation.
digital reader board. I guess
Or the
was it.
digital reader,
Yeah, on
Digital
Broadway.
digital reader board, yeah.
so, did I understand you to say, though, that you would really prefer that it was one clean application, or makes no difference to the city structure, whether it's 2?
No, I don't,
We're not going after him in any,
I don't see
okay.
one way being preferable to the
No matter
other.
what, he has to reappear, so that's fine. Okay.
Well, we do have a motion and a second for this particular application. It would allow him to move forward with the process to get his bigger, better bold up, and then he would have to come back and resubmit another variance application for the digital reader.
I have a question. I didn't understand that he was going to be allowed to pull the bigger, bolder, better up. I thought it was based on square footage, so the digital readers are taking place, excuse me,
Oh.
was that what you said, Ella, that the digital reader would take
I
the
guess
place of the
that's
bigger,
what
bolder, and
We,
better?
we talked about that as an option, but if we wanted to get
Okay.
into details, the variance is, that you're approving is technically for those 2 signs. So, I guess that would be up to you
Except
guys whether
the
we.
square footage.
To make it clean, it'd probably be better just to deny it, have them come back next month with a variance request for everything, and that way it's stayed clean.
All right.
You've got it all in front of us instead of trying to pick it apart.
Just that.
Again, we're gonna put him off for another 2 months on this thing.
Well, he's gonna be put off for another 2 months
No,
anyway.
not necessarily, not if right now it's for the bigger, bolder, better.
You may not hear.
But then you wouldn't be in compliance if you put those up with,
Well, nobody's gonna, okay.
well, I mean, we're getting technical.
Yeah, because I don't think by the time you guys whatever you guys do to say take him down, he'll be in front of the council.
Right.
As long as the council don't change, you're gonna be fine. But don't bring any more than what's submitted on this application here on this
Yeah.
piece of paper.
Like a threat.
I can't put some twirly sign up on the roof. or-
Well, and it's not like this is keeping you from doing your business. Your
No,
business
no,
is open
no.
and running and,
Yeah.
yeah.
All the potato olays you can eat.
I guess I just need to make sure I'm clear whether I'm allowed to put that sign, those 2 signs up and then come back, or if I have to wait.
I would just clarify that regardless of if we approve it, deny, you have to wait for the city for their approval. So
Council.
just your council,
Oh, yeah,
excuse me.
yeah,
Further
And that would be
recommendations?
Tuesday,
Tuesday, yeah.
Right.
because we're just a recommendation body, and the council makes the decision.
Okay.
So do we want to stick with our original motion, or?
I would like to stick with the original motion.
Take a vote.
I'm going to have Dave call roll.
Okay, Ms. Earl,
Aye.
Ms. Aukus,
Aye.
Ms. Mako,
Aye.
Mr. Golden,
Aye.
Mr. Firth,
Aye.
Mr. Mack.
Aye. Motion carried. So, Andrew, this will come to the council meeting
Correct.
this coming Tuesday. As a recommendation, and then you're under the understanding that you'll have to fill out another variance application, and we'll see you here in September.
We know we have a September
Alright.
meeting.
I appreciate that for now.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Andy.
All right. Item 5.1. Consider for approval the final plot of Oak Bluffs 9th edition. And we'll look for staff report.
Okay, the applicant is Mike Kroll, and the property owner is M&D Properties LLC. The legal description of the property is Lot 1, Block 1, Oak Bluffs, 8th edition. Street address is 1406 to 1446 6 North Street. Property is generally located north of 6 North Street, east of North Highland Avenue, and south of 7th North Street. The City Council approved the preliminary plat with conditions at its August 4th, 2020 meeting. The last meeting, we went directly to the plat description. Do you have any objection if we do that at this time? Okay. The plat has a total area of 4.75 acres. Plat would convert one lot into 5 lots. Lots 1 and 2 would accommodate 1 twin home. Lots 3 and 4 would accommodate 2 single-family residences. And Lot 5 is tentatively planned for 3 fourplexes. Current city code requirements and the dimensions of lot areas of the new lots is provided. There has been no change in that table since the last meeting. All of the lots would comply with city code requirements. Status of conditions. Number 1 is platting fee of $300. That payment is pending. Number 2 is provide an electronic file of the plat in AutoCAD 2016 or newer format. That notification has been provided to the land surveyor. Enter into a development agreement with the city. Preparation of a draft agreement is pending. Provide stormwater treatment facility for the area to be platted. That notification has been provided to the owner. And secure a conditional use permit for the proposed land use activities on Lot 5 as required by the community unit requirements of the city code. That notification has been provided to the owner. The attachments include the final plat and an aerial photograph of the property. Staff would recommend approval of the final plat with conditions and since it complies with city code requirements. The recommended conditions would be items 1, 3, 4, and 5 under status of conditions. And then 2 potential motions are provided.
Thank you, Dave. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion.
I'd move to approve with the staff provided conditions.
I
I'll
second.
second.
We have a motion and a second to approve with the 1, 3, 4, and 5 conditions from staff. And we'll have Dave call roll.
Okay, Ms. Earl,
Aye.
Ms. Aukus,
Aye.
Ms. Mako,
Yes.
Mr. Golden,
Yes.
Mr. Firth,
Yes.
Mr. Mack.
Yes. Motion carried. Item 6.1, City Council decisions concerning Planning Commission matters in August of 2020.
Okay, at the August 4th meeting, the City Council conducted a public hearing and unanimously approved the vacation of a portion of 17 South Street between Noam Steel and Recycling and the storage buildings and the bike trail. It's a fairly small area. They also conducted a public hearing and approved with conditions the sale of property at 1200 Water Street to Kala Contemporary Woodwork LLC, and that was approved on a 3-to-1 vote. They also approved the preliminary plat of Oak Bluffs 9th edition, as we just discussed. They approved an amended interim use permit to Brett Meyer, authorizing the operation of a part-time gunsmithing business at 115 North Washington Street. The reason an amended permit was required was because of questions that were raised by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, also known as ATF. And they questioned what type of retail sales would be allowed. Because in the list of conditions that we had, we said we didn't want retail sales to take place on the property, and I think what our intention was is that we didn't want walk-in traffic taking place. We don't want someone walking in and looking at a bunch of guns on racks and saying, I want to purchase this one. And what he had hoped to secure authorization to do is to do internet sales and then also to assemble guns for people and then you obviously sell them to them. So that was clarified, and I just happened to run into him today, and he said that that permit process is proceeding now. So good to hear that. Council also approved a conditional use permit then to Harold Enamorado of Kala Contemporary Woodwork to allow the operation of the portable sawmill at the in an RA zoning district at 1200 Water Street, and that was with conditions. At the August 18th meeting, there was 3 public hearings on final plats. There was for the Bodie edition, the Herman Monument edition, and the Hyman edition. And we thought we had addressed all of the conditions, and then we had 2 crop up on 2 of the plats. They had outstanding mortgages. And when you have a mortgage against a property and you're platting it, the mortgage holder has to sign the plat. So the plats will be amended to include a signature line for a bank representative to sign. And then finally, we had to have the city council, they had approved the Kala conditional use permit by motion, and it needs to be done by resolution, so that came back for approval.
Thank you, Dave. Item 6.2 would be Heritage Preservation Commission activities, would go to Elwood.
We have no items come forward.
Okay, so any further discussion here for meeting adjourned?